I want to tell you something that I have never said to anyone in full. Not to my sister, not to my attorney, not even to myself in the complete version. Because of some parts of it, I was not ready to look at directly until recently. I am going to tell you all of it now, because I think you need to hear the whole thing to understand what actually happened. And because the part that matters most, the part that changed everything, was so small and so ordinary that if I skip it, you will never understand how any of the rest of it was possible. 5 years ago, on a Thursday evening in November, my mother left me a voicemail. I almost deleted it. IHad been doing that a lot that year, deleting her messages without listening, because they always left me feeling smaller than I was before I heard them. But something made me stop. I sat in my car in the driveway of the house I shared with my son Eli, and I listened to the whole thing. My mother's voice was warm and reasonable the way it always was, saying she was worried about me, saying she hoped I was making good decisions, saying she just wanted what was best for Eli. And underneath all of that warmth, clear as anything once you knew how to hear it, was something else entirely, a warning, not stated, just present, the way cold air comes under a door before a storm. I did not delete the message. I saved it to a folder I created that night and labeled simply, Ellen. I did not know then that I was starting something. I thought I was just keeping a record. I had no idea that 232 voicemails later, that folder would be the thing that stood between my son and the plan my mother had been building for 5 years. My name is Rachel. I am 34 years old. I am a full-time mother, and I have been raising my son Ellie alone since he was 2 years old when I left a marriage that my mother never approved of. Not because it was bad, but because it was mine. I did not have a career to come back to when the marriage ended. I had a child and a small apartment and a savings account that would last 18 months if I was careful. My mother told everyone that I was struggling. She was not entirely wrong. But struggling and unfit are two very different things. And my mother spent 5 years trying to convince the world that they were the same. Before I tell you what happened, I want you to tell me something. What time is it where you are right now? Are you watching this at night after the kids are in bed, in that quiet hour that belongs only to you? Or are you somewhere else entirely? Somewhere you went to hear that someone else has lived through the version of the thing you are currently trying to name? Drop it in the comments. I am genuinely curious how far this story travels. Because what I am about to tell you is the kind of thing that more mothers live through than anyone admits out loud. The voicemails started changing in year 2. For the first year, they were manageable. My mother called often. She left messages that were full of concern and advice, and the specific kind of love that comes with conditions attached. I saved them all because something in me recognized, even then, that her words were worth keeping. Not because they were kind, because they were consistent. And consistency, when it is the wrong kind, is its own form of evidence. In year 2, the language shifted. I noticed it the way you notice a change in someone's behavior when you have known them long enough. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the accumulation of small things that each seem normal until you look at them together. My mother stopped, saying, I am worried about you, and started saying, I am worried about Eli. She stopped describing my choices as mistakes, and started describing them as risks to my son. She stopped positioning herself as my mother, and started positioning herself as Eli's protector. Small shift. Enormous implication. I opened my notes app and wrote one sentence. She is changing her target from me to my son. I did not know yet what she was building. I only knew that something had changed direction. At Eli's 4-year checkup, his pediatrician Dr. Reeves mentioned carefully that she had received a call from a woman identifying herself as Eli's grandmother. Thueman had expressed concerns about his home environment. Dr. Reeves said this gently, watching my face, clearly trying to determine whether I knew about it. I asked what concerns. Dr. Reeves read from her notes. Eli seems withdrawn during grandmother's visits. Mother works long hours. Child is frequently tired. I looked at my son, sitting on the examination tables, swinging his legs, and looking at a poster of cartoon animals on the wall, and I felt something settle inside me that was not quite anger and not quite fear. It was clarity. The specific clarity you get when a thing you suspected is confirmed. I asked Dr. Reeves how many times my mother had called. She checked her file. Twice in the last 3 months. I thanked her. I drove home. I opened the Ellen folder and found a voicemail from 6 weeks earlier, in which my mother said, near the end, almost as an aside, that she had been making sure the right people know what she knows. I had saved that message without fully understanding it. I understood it now. My mother had been calling my son's doctor. She had been filing concerns with medical professionals. She had been building a record outside of me knowledge. Using Eli's care providers as witnesses, she had not asked permission to involve. I went home that afternoon and I made Eli his favorited dinner, and I helped him with his bath, and I read him 2 chapters of his book, and I put him to bed. And then I sat at my kitchen table and I started going through every voicemail from the previous 2 years in order, looking for the pattern I had been sensing, but not seeing. It took me 3 evenings. By the end of the third evening, I had found 40 messages I had saved without understanding their full significance. IHad been keeping records without knowing exactly what I was recording. My body had understood something my mind had not caught up to yet. Voicemail 47 was the one that changed everything. I found it on the second evening. I almost skipped it because it was short, only 93 seconds. And the first few seconds sounded like a misdial. But I listened. And in those 93 seconds, my mother accidentally handed me the center of her entire plan. She had called my number by mistake, or she had pressed it without realizing while she was in the middle of a conversation. What I heard was my mother speaking to someone else, a woman whose voice I did not immediately recognize, and what she was saying was not a grandmother's concern. It was a strategy session. She mentioned an attorney. She mentioned a petition. She mentioned that she had been documenting for 14 months, and that she was getting close to having enough. She mentioned, and this is the part I played 3 times sitting at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night. She mentioned the County Family Services office by name. She said she had already spoken to someone there. She said she thought it was almost time. I sat with that for a long time. My son was asleep down the hall. The house was quiet, and I understood that the woman I called my mother had been quietly constructing a legal case against me for over a year while calling me on Sundays to ask how Eli was doing. I called my attorney the next morning. I told her I needed to meet as soon as possible. I told her I had audio evidence of a family member coordinating a legal campaign against my parental rights. She told me to bring everything. I brought 203 voicemails on a tablet, organized by date, and a printed timeline I had made the night before at my kitchen table while Eli slept. I want to stop here because I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, Rachel, why did you wait? Why did you save messages for 2 years without doing anything with them? And I want to answer that honestly, because I think it is the most important part of the story for anyone who is currently living inside something similar. I waited because I was not certain. Because my mother is my mother. Because I spent 34 years being told that my instincts about her were oversensitive, that I was reading too much into things, that she was just trying to help. Because leaving a marriage and raising a child alone is genuinely hard, and some part of me wondered, in the quiet moments, whether she might be at least partially right about some of it. I waited, because certainty takes time when the person you are trying to be certain about as a spewin you have loved your entire life, and who has been managing your self-doubt since you were old enough to have any. Voicemail 47 gave me certainty, not because it was the worst thing she had said, but because it was the most honest thing she had ever said, and she had not meant for me to hear it. The woman on voicemail 47 was my Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. A woman I had always found slightly cold, but never thought of as deliberately unkind. I recognized her voice on the third listening. I told my sister Amy. And Amy went quiet in a way that told me she was not entirely surprised. Amy said she had been hearing things at family dinners, that my mother had been telling people for 2 years that I was struggling, that Eli was not thriving, that something needed to be done. Amy said she had assumed it was just mom being mom. She had not understood it was organized. I called Carol directly, not to accuse her, to ask her one question. I said, Carol, did you know my mother had consulted an attorney about a grandparent rights petition? Carol was silent for a long time. Then she said, no, she said. Ellen had told her she was building a file to protect Eli if things got worse. She said she had not understood. It had gone as far as legal consultation. I said I understood. I said, I was not calling to argue. I was calling because Carol deserved to know the full picture of what she had been participating in. Carol asked me what she should do. I said I thought she should speak to her own attorney. Then I said one more thing. I said, Carol, I have 203 voicemails. I have saved all of them. There was a very long silence. Then Carol said, oh, Rachel. And in those 2 words, I could hear the specific sound of someone understanding, for the first time, the scale of what had been done. The knock came on a Tuesday morning. I had been expecting it. Not that morning specifically. But I had known for 3 weeks that it was coming, and I had spent those 3 weeks preparing. I had met twice more with my attorney. I had organized my evidence into a formal exhibit with my attorney's guidance. I had obtained a copy of Eli's full medical file, including Dr. Reeves' notes about my mother's calls. I had prepared a written timeline. I had done everything a woman with no legal training and no professional credentials could do at a kitchen table. At night, after her son was in bed, I had done it the way I do everything, quietly, carefully, and completely. When the investigator knocked, I answered the door in my regular clothes with my regular face. Her name was Ms. Torres. She was professional and kind and clearly experienced. She asked to come in. I said yes. I offered her tea, which she declined. She asked me standard questions about Eli's routine, his school, his medical care, his daily life. I answered every question clearly and completely. Then I asked if she would like to see my file. Ms. Torres looked at me for a moment. Then she said, yes. I placed a tablet on the kitchen table between us and opened a folder organized by date, category, and source. Voicemails, text messages, screenshots, medical notes, a formal timeline, a summary document. Ms. Torres looked at the screen for a moment without speaking. Then she looked up at me and asked how long I had been building this. I said 2 years of organized documentation and approximately 1 year of unsystematic record-keeping before that. She wrote something in her notebook. I could not read what she wrote. I did not need to. I could see from her face that the power in the room had shifted from the moment she walked into this moment. She had arrived to investigate a mother. She had found a woman who had been investigated for 2 years without knowing it and had built her response in silence. 2 days after Ms. Torres's first visit, Dr. Reeves called me. She said she had been contacted by the Child Welfare Office as part of their standard investigation. She said she wanted me to know what she had told them before I heard it through any other channel. She had told them that Eli was a healthy, developmentally appropriate child with a consistent care record and a mother who had never missed a scheduled visit, had always followed medical recommendations promptly, and had responded to every clinical concern with immediate and appropriate action. She had also told them something I had not known she had done. She had told them that she had been receiving calls from a woman identifying herself as Eli's grandmother for the past 2 years, and that the pattern of those calls shad concerned her professionally because the concerns raised were consistently at odds with her own clinical observations. She said she had noted this discrepancy in Eli's file each time. That notation was no part of the investigation record. I thanked her. I sat down on the kitchen floor after E hung up, not because I was devastated, but because I had been holding myself so carefully for so many weeks that the relief of one person's simply telling the truth without being asked required me to sit down and breathe it in properly. That Wednesday evening, Eli said something at dinner that I want to tell you about because I think it is the part of this story that people most need to hear. He said, without looking up from his plate, that Grandma had told him something at the park last Sunday. I kept my voice completely steady and asked what Grandma said. He said, Grandma told him that sometimes moms get sick in a way you cannot see, and that if Heaver felt scared, he could call Grandma and Grandma would come get him. I set down my fork. I asked when this happened. He said last Sunday. At the park, after school. I did not know Eli had seen my mother last Sunday. My mother was not supposed to have unsupervised contact with Ellie. I had communicated this clearly in a text message 8 months earlier. I had not formalized it in any legal document because I had not believed at the time that it would need to be. I believed it now. I waited until Eli was in bed. Then I added a new section to my file. I labeled it Eli, direct contact. I added the date, what he had told me, and the text message I had sent my mother 8 months earlier. Then I sat at my kitchen table, and I thought about what it means to tell a 7-year-old that his mother might be sick in a way he cannot see. I thought about what that plants in a child's mind, what it asks him to watch for, what it turns an ordinary Tuesday into, a day of monitoring rather than just living. I thought about my son going to school the next morning carrying that seed my mother had placed in him at the park without asking my permission. And I added on a more note to the file. The note said, "She is using Elias an instrument." This is the line. My attorney called on a Friday with a carefully neutral voice. She had found something. A petition for grandparent visitation rights filed in our county 3 months earlier. The petitioner was Ellen Margaret Crawford, my mother. The petition requested 12 hours of formalized weekly visitation, citing ongoing concern for Eli's welfare. It had been filed incorrectly and returned by the court for amendment. My mother did not know that I knew it existed. My attorney told me something important. She said that because the petition had been returned unfiled, its contents, including all of my mother's supporting documentation, were visible to us in a way they would not have been if it had been properly filed and served. We could see my mother's entire hand before the legal game officially began. I asked my attorney to tell me what my mother's documentation contained. She described it carefully. 14 months of handwritten journal entries, photographs of Eli looking tired or upset, a letter of support from Aunt Carol, and 2 screenshots of text messages between my mother and me that had been cropped to remove the surrounding context. My attorney read me the cropped versions first, and then full unedited versions. In full, The message showed me setting a clear and reasonable boundary with my mother about unsupervised contact. Cropped, they had been edited to appear as though I was admitting to being overwhelmed and unable to cope. My mother had taken the moments when I had been most direct and most boundaried and edited them into evidence of my inadequacy. She had taken my strength and made it look like weakness. I had the originals of everything. I called Carol that evening. I read her the full unedited messages aloud, slowly and completely. Carol wasn't for a long moment. Then she said, she did not know they had been cut, she said. Ellen had shown them to her as evidence of Rachel struggling, and she had believed they were complete, because why would her sister show her something false? I said I understood. I said I was not calling to make her feel guilty. I was calling because her name was on a legal petition and she deserved to see what she had actually endorsed. Carol asked what she should do. I said I thought she should speak to an attorney. And then I said, Carol, there are 212 voicemails. I have kept all of them, including the on where you and my mother discussed the legal strategy. There was a silence so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Carol said, I did not know that was being recorded. I said it was not a recording. It was a voicemail my mother left on my phone by accident. Another silence. Then, very quietly, Carol said, Oh, Rachel, I am so sorry. 2 weeks before Ms. Torres's follow-up interview, my mother called Eli's school. The principal called me the next morning to inform. A woman identifying herself as Eli's grandmother had called, asking to be added to the emergency contact list and requesting information about his attendance record and whether any concerns had been flagged about his home situation. The school had not made any changes because the request had not come through the proper written channels required by their policy. But they were calling to inform Vre as a courtesy. I thanked the principal. I hung up. I opened the voicemail my mother had left me the Friday before the school call. In it, she mentioned, almost as an aside near the end, that she had been making sure everyone who works with Eli knows she's available. I added the school call to my file. Then, I called Ms. Torres and left a detailed message updating the investigation record. My mother was still building her case. She did not know that every move she made was being documented and reported to the investigator in real time. She did not know that the investigation she had triggered was no longer moving in the direction she had intended. For the follow-up interview with Ms. Torres, I prepared a formal exhibit. I spent one full weekend organizing 212 voicemails into a timeline. I selected 32 that were directly relevant. I organized them into terceries. Misrepresentation of my mental state, coordination with third parties, statements regarding legal strategy, statements made to Eli directly without my knowledge or consent, and statements that directly contradicted the claims in my mother's petition. I labeled each voicemail by date, length, and category. The 32nd and final voicemail in the exhibit was from 4 days before the child services knock. In it, my mother's voice was almost cheerful. She said she thought this was almost over, that soon things would be the way they were supposed to be. That Eli was going to be fine once he was in a stable environment. She said it the way someone says something when they believe they have already won. I brought the exhibit to the follow-up interview on a tablet. Ms. Torres listened to all 32 voicemails. She did not speak during most of them. She took careful notes. When I played voicemail 47, the accidental one, the 93 seconds in which my mother described her legal strategy to Carol without knowing she was leaving a message on my phone. Ms. Torres stopped writing. She listened with her pen still. When it ended, she asked me to play it again. I played it again. Then she closed her notebook, excused herself from the room, and made a phone call. She was gone 11 minutes. When she returned, her expression was professionally neutral. But something in how she carried herself had changed. She told me she had consulted with her supervisor. She told me the evidence I had provided raised questions that went beyond the scope of a standard child welfare investigation. She told me that deliberately filing a false child welfare report is a criminal matter in our state. She told me she could not discuss the specifics of what came next, but that I should preserve all evidence and ensure my attorney was available. Then she closed my file, not as inconclusive, as a specific designation that my attorney later explained meant no credible basis found and reporting party conduct referred for review. The investigation had flipped. I was no longer the subject. My mother was. My mother found out through her own attorney. The grandparent rights petition could not be refiled while she was under review for a false report referral. Her attorney advised her strongly against any further legal action. My mother called me that evening. I sent her to voicemail. She left message number 213. I will tell you about that message in a moment. But first, I want to tell you what happened. At the family dinner 3 weeks later, because that was the moment everything became public in the way that mattered. Amy called me after the dinner. She said, my mother had come and had told the family her version of events. In Ellen's version, I had set a trap. I had been recording her for years, waiting for an opportunity. IHad weaponized her love for her grandson against her. While my mother was speaking, Carol put her phone on the table. On the screen was the text message, the full unedited version, that I had read to Carol over the phone. Carol said, in front of everyone, Ellen, I want to ask you something. Did you show me the complete message or did you cut it? My mother said she had shown the relevant parts. Carol said she wanted everyone to see the relevant parts in full. And she read the complete message aloud at the family table. Amy said that after Carol finished reading, 3 family members who had been quietly supportive of my mother stood up from the table. Not in anger, not dramatically. They simply gathered their things and stopped sitting with her. One of them, my mother's closest friend in the family, her cousin Margaret, put her hand briefly on the table near my mother's hand, not on it, just near it, in the way you acknowledge a grief that you cannot fix. And then she left. My mother sat at the table with the people who remained and thessalons of the people who had left. Carol had become the person who dismantled my mother's narrative in my mother's own family, using my mother's own evidence, in my mother's own presence. I had not organized that. I had not planned it. I had simply told Carol the truth and trusted that she would do something with it. She did. Message number 213. Arrived the evening. My mother learned the investigation had been referred. It was different from every message before it. All 212 previous messages had been controlled. Careful. Constructed in the specific way of someone who believes they are building towards something. Message 213 had none of that. My mother was crying. She said she was just trying to protect Eli. She said I had never let her bay grandmother. She said she did not think it would go this far. She said she was sorry. She did not ask for anything. She did not explain anything. She just said she was sorry and that she loved Eli and she hoped I was okay. Then the message ended. I saved it. I labeled it number 213. I did not respond. Not because I was cruel, but because I had learned over 5 years that responding to my mother's messages was not something she used to build connection. It was something she used to build evidence. And there was nothing left for her to build. The investigation was referred. The petition was dead. Carol had read the truth at the family table. The folder was complete. Whatever my mother was feeling in that message. And I believe it was real. I believe some part of her genuinely felt it. Was something she would have sapsit with, without my management of it. That was not punishment. That was just the way things actually were. For the first time in a very long time, without an yawn pretending otherwise. 6 months later, Eli came to me with his tablet. He said Grandma had sent him a message. He said he did not know how to open it. I asked if I could look. It was a voice message sent through the family messaging app my mother had always used. 43 seconds long, I played it for him. My mother's voice was tired and small, and nothing like the voice inony of the previous 213 messages. She said she loved him, she said. She was sorry she had scared him. She said she hoped one day he would understand that she had loved him, more than she knew how to show correctly. She did not ask to see him. She did not mention me. She did not attach any conditions or requests. She just said those things, and then the message ended. Ely looked at me when it finished. He asked if Grandma was okay. I told him I thought she was going through something difficult. He thought about this for a moment, with the specific seriousness of a 7-year-old processing a complicated truth, then asked if he could listen to it again. I said yes. He'll listen to it again. Then he said, she said she was so sorry. I said yes, she did. He nodded slowly, the way children nod when they are filing something away to return to later. Then he went back to what he had been doing before. I saved the message. I did not label it by number or category. I labeled it simply, from Grandma for Eli, and I decided that when my son is old enough to ask the real questions about this time in his life, questions I know are coming, questions I will not be able to answer for him the way I answer other things, that message will be there. Not as evidence, not as proof of anything, just as the truest thing his grandmother ever said to him. 43 seconds at the end of 5 years, when she was no longer performing, and no longer building, and no longer managing anyone's perception of anything. Just an old woman speaking into a phone to a child she loved him perfectly and hurt without meaning to. Or maybe meaning to, in ways she could not fully see. And saying the thing she should have said from the beginning. I do not know what my relationship with my mother will be in 5 years. I do not know what Eli will decide when. He is old enough to decide for himself. I know that he is safe, and that his life is his own, and that nobody is using him as an instrument anymore. I know that the folder is archived, and that I hope I never need to open it again. I know that some mornings I wake up, and the house is quiet, and the quiet belongs to us completely, and I feel something I did not feel for a long time. Not victory. Not relief exactly. Something simpler. The specific ordinary peace of a woman in her own home with her son down the hall, and no one building a case against either of them. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. If you have ever been the mother that someone tried to make a case against, if you have ever been told your love was not enough, and your life was not stable, and your instincts were not reliable, drop a rose in the comments. I will know you were there. And if this story reached someone you know tonight, share it with them. Not tomorrow. Tonight, because the woman who needs to hear this is probably not going to find it by looking for it. She is going to find it because someone who loves her sent it. This story has been created for storytelling and reflection purposes. All names and identifying details have been changed. If any part of this resonated with something you are currently living through, please know that what you are noticing is real, and you are allowed to write it down, and you are allowed to save it. I am Rachel. And this has been Thorns in Pearls.